Seller financing, that's when the seller of the business finances the buyer of the business into the business. Now we're going to talk about a little used option, but a very effective way of doing seller's finance, and that's called a transaction or a transition over time. Let me explain. Now, one of the reasons it works really well is the buyer doesn't need to have any deposit. They don't need to have funding and they don't need to have security. Because essentially speaking, at the end of each year or whatever the agreed period is, the business is valued and a certain percentage of shares changes hands. Now, that then becomes a loan back to the purchaser, and the purchaser pays that loan off with the dividends from the business. Now in the beginning, yes, he's probably going to have to dip into his salary a little bit, but essentially speaking, he can buy the business, no security, no deposit, and he buys it out over time. So it works very well. Now obviously, as the shareholding changes, the directorships change as well. There may be a point in the shareholding where the buyer then becomes a director of the company. And clearly, as time goes by and as the buyer's shareholding increases, so does the dividend payments, and so they can take bigger chunks of the business over time because the dividends will be able to pay for more of the business. Now at some point it'll reach a tipping point where the buyer will then have more shares than the seller, the directorships that will change, and that buyer will then be running the business. That transition will continue to take place until eventually the seller has, well, zero shareholding and the buyer owns the business. Now, as I said, that might take 3 or 4 years, 5 years or 10 years, whatever it is to do, but it's a good way of buying a business on vendor finance with pretty much no money, provided you have the skills to add value to the business. There are a few extra points that you'll need to consider. So what happens if things don't work out according to plan? What happens if halfway through the process that both parties decide they don't like one another, or they don't want to do this anymore, or just simply the process is at an end? Well, that's okay, because both parties can walk away with something. They have a shareholding level. Whatever had the transactions that have occurred up until now, they stay in force. So both parties have a shareholding in the company, and they can go through the process of dissolving their partnership and walking away with the shares that they have in the business. There are some things to consider around that though. Vitally important to have a quality sale and purchase agreement, an extremely good shareholding agreement, and the other paperwork around that. What you don't want to happen is to get into an argument later on. So all the paperwork must be done at the very beginning, and it must cover the contingencies that we've talked about. It must cover a partnership breakup. It must cover 100% disposal of the business. I mean, what happens if you get halfway through the process and both sides decide, well, they've had enough, let's just sell the business in its entirety and split the proceeds? So the process for that, the method of valuation, and how that partnership breakup will occur needs to be documented at the very beginning when everybody's in agreement. I don't know if you've ever been through a divorce or a marriage breakup or a partnership breakup, but at the beginning it's very easy to agree on things. When you're going through that breakup, emotion takes over and it's very hard to agree. So in a transaction like this, it's important to have everything documented at the very beginning to enable a very smooth change if that change needs to happen. So if you're getting value from this video, and I certainly hope that you are, there's a button just for people like you down there. It looks like this. It's called the like button. Give it a click. If you're feeling generous, you might want to use the thanks button, and of course hit subscribe. 1, 2 or 3 of those things, or all of those things, and I'd be really appreciative. So thanks very much. Back to the video. So some of those points to consider is that the valuation of the business might change over time. Clearly, if the business is performing well, the valuation of the business goes up, and therefore the cost of the shares will go up. And that's all going to be included in the sale and purchase agreement. And that's fine, because if the business is getting better, then clearly it's a better business to buy, and more likely the buyer will want to buy in. Conversely, if the business is not performing as well as it could be, the valuation can go down. So it does have its risk and rewards for both parties, but essentially it's a sound way of paying the correct price for a business over time. So I'm not sure why, but this is a little used strategy, but it's a very effective one. What happens here is the buyer of the business works in the business. Now, they become an employee of the business, that's how they start, and over time, a portion of the business ownership passes to them. And how they pay for that portion of the ownership is based on the profits of the business. So effectively, the seller lends them the money over time and the business pays those loans off. It's a very effective way of ownership over time, and it's especially good if the buyer has skills related to that business, if the buyer is an asset to the business and can add value to the business over time. So the seller may be getting ready to retire and he's looking around and he's trying to find someone who he can sell the business to, who has similar skills to him and who can learn the business over time. Now, that's not always possible, obviously. So what they do is they employ someone, and that someone works in the business for a period of time. They're adding value to the business by working in the business, and as a result, the owner gives them shares which they pay for over time. It's a simple transaction and it works really well. So another way of buying a business is by using earnouts as seller financing. How does that work? Have a look at that video up there. Thanks for watching. I'll see you over there. See you next time.